Okay, the last set I'm going to cut out is that wacky one that has the little tie that probably isn't going to reach over. I'm doing something different on this one. Normally this would be the center back on the fold. I'm not going to cut it on the fold. I'm trying to squeeze it into the remnants of this pillowcase here. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch right up here and create a seam there instead of a fold. All right, so we're going to pin that guy down. And so I'm cutting 4 as opposed to 2 on the fold. And I have to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance on all edges. Right? Right. Okay. Except not that edge right there. Remember that part? There. Let's see if we can cram this in here. Come on, Moots. Oof. That's better. Okay. The reason why I flipped it over, remember how we talk about making circle skirts and cutting things on the bias and bloop, 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 bloop? We're going to flip this over so it's running along the grain of the fabric and not against it. Okay, so now I have my 4 pieces of this. I'm going to cut the interfacing. I only need 2 pieces of the interfacing. And we will be ready to go with this guy. Oof, that's gross. I will fix that. Interfacing. 2 pieces of interfacing for this guy. All right, good. And this was the other part of that. Okay, done. Now we will take the next step and I will show you how you fuse the interfacing to the collar, the wrong side of each of your collar pieces, okay? I am now ironing the flat collar interfacing. If for any reason you have forgotten how to fuse the interfacing to your fabric, go back to the Mandarin collar tutorial, and that gives a much longer how to do that. So there's my flat collar. Okay, this one is for the flat collar with the roll, that little adaptation we made. What I want to point out here, I went in, do you remember when we cut it, I had to add the seam allowance because I didn't want to cut it on the fold. I went ahead and just stitched that really quickly. So stitch your center back seam if you too created one. If you didn't and that's on the fold, then bully for you, you're the winner of the flat collar with the roll one. So then you're going to match your 2 right sides. Give yourself some pins. Do one right there. And you can totally pin more if you want to. I am clearly trying to rush and get all of these done for you guys before I leave. This one I think is suffering the most. I really don't think I made it long enough for it to actually tie. But we'll find out, won't we? There is your neck edge. So do not stitch. Give yourself a 1/2 inch on that neck edge, right where it kind of comes to a point. So start a 1/2 inch down and you're going to stitch much cleaner than this line because the edge of your fabric will follow the 1/2 inch hash on your, I'm going to round that out a little bit right there, on your sewing machine. So stitch 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. Leave that open. Well, I wonder if you have to. You don't have to leave that open. Go ahead and come over. And then you'll give yourself a 1/2 inch down from that little corner poke thing there. Okay, that is you'll go on the machine and stitch that down, and that's the flat collar with the roll adaptation. And we're at our last collar. And this is clearly the last one because I have rushed through so many steps on this guy. I am apologetic. As I was stitching it down, I was like, ooh, that cutting job is terrible. And these ties definitely have to be a little bit longer. But I will show you how to attach the collar. And if you choose to make one like this, just keep in mind that you're gonna have to extend these little flaps much longer if you want a pretty tie that hangs. Right now it'll probably be more like one of those schoolgirl uniform collars like that, which might be fun for a costume. I did a children's hour costume like that. Okay, so very much the same way as the mandarin, the flat collar, and your standing collar. You're gonna line up your center seam with your center back, pull that first layer back, pin the layer that's behind it with your garment all the way around this neck edge. Pin, 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 all the way around that neck edge. Beautiful. And on this one, I didn't go all the way to the end, so you'll still have a little bit of a fold over here, but it's when we turn this seam down, we'll turn some of that seam down and just make a nice through line. Okay, so pin, 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 pin to the point where you stopped. I stopped right, boop, there. So what I'll do at this neck edge is come in, fold it over like that, iron it, and then when I account for that 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'll tuck that front part down as well. Okay, go forth and make amazing things.